There's a kind of exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix, a heaviness in the soul that stays, no matter how much rest you get. And if you felt it, it's not just tiredness, it's something deeper. A slow, quiet draining of your spirit. This doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual thing. A lifetime of small choices, unnoticed habits, and silent burdens we carry without realizing their weight. Before we know it, the soul that once felt light, curious, and full of life starts to dim. Before we get further, I'd love to know where you're joining us from. And if you find wisdom in these conversations, a like and subscribe would mean a lot. Not just for me, but for others who might be searching for the same answers. Now, let's talk about this. Because if you feel your soul is drained, it's not too late to reclaim it. One of the greatest truths about life is that the things that exhaust us the most aren't always the loud, obvious struggles. It's the quiet, hidden battles, the ones we don't even recognize are happening. And if we don't become aware of them, they'll keep taking from us, bit by bit. There are 5 major things that drain your soul. But today, we'll start with the first, the one that sneaks up on most people before they even realize it. The first thing that drains your soul is carrying burdens that don't belong to you. Now, at first, that might not sound like a big deal. After all, isn't it a good thing to help others, to support people you love, to be reliable? That's what we've been taught, isn't it? And that's true to a point. But what happens when you take on too much? What happens when you spend years, sometimes decades, holding up other people's problems, sacrificing your own peace, bending over backward to be what others need? You start to disappear, not physically, but emotionally, mentally. Your soul shrinks under the weight of responsibilities that were never yours to carry in the first place. Think about it. How many times have you been the one who always listens, who always helps, who always puts everyone else before yourself? And how often have you felt like no one sees the toll it takes on you? That's the danger. It's subtle. It disguises itself as kindness, as duty, as love. But over time, it turns into exhaustion, resentment, a feeling of being unseen and unappreciated. And here's the truth most people don't talk about. You are not meant to carry everything. You are not responsible for fixing everyone. You are not responsible for holding every piece together. You are not responsible for sacrificing your soul so others can feel comfortable. So, how do you reclaim yourself from this? You start by setting something that many people struggle with: boundaries. And no, boundaries don't mean pushing people away or becoming cold-hearted. Boundaries mean recognizing where you end and where others begin. They mean understanding that you can be kind without being a martyr, that you can care without carrying. Imagine you're standing in a river and someone is drowning. You throw them a rope, but instead of pulling themselves up, they expect you to jump in, hold them up, and swim them to shore. Now, maybe you can do that for one person once or twice, but what happens when it's 5 people? 10? 20? Eventually you drown too. The healthier way? Throw the rope. Offer guidance. Give support. But don't let yourself be pulled under, because your life, your peace, matters just as much as anyone else's. And this is something many people don't realize until later in life. Sometimes when you stop carrying others, they finally learn to carry themselves. But what about guilt? What about that deep, nagging feeling that says, if I don't help, who will? You know that feeling in the pit of your stomach, the one that whispers, you should have done more, you should have been better, you should have been there. It's a quiet voice, but it's relentless. And over time, it drains the life out of you. Guilt is one of the heaviest weights a person can carry. And the worst part? Most of the time, we don't even realize how much it's taking from us. It disguises itself well. It tells you that feeling guilty means you're a good person, that it means you care, that if you let go of it, you're being selfish. But here's the truth that few people will tell you. Guilt is not a sign of love. It's a chain. And if you don't learn how to break free from it, it will follow you for the rest of your life. Most guilt doesn't come from what we've actually done. It comes from what we believe we should have done. I should have called more. I should have helped more. I should have been a better friend, a better parent, a better partner. I should have known better. But let me ask you something. How much of this guilt is truly yours? And how much of it is just an impossible standard you've placed on yourself? See, the past is a closed door. No amount of guilt will ever change it. And yet, so many of us keep punishing ourselves for things we can't go back and fix. The truth is, there are only two ways guilt ever serves you. 1. If you've done something wrong, and you can still make it right. 2. If it teaches you a lesson you can carry forward. That's it. Everything else, it's just self-punishment. And most of us don't even realize how much we've been punishing ourselves. Think about how much time and energy you've spent replaying old mistakes in your mind, holding yourself to unrealistic expectations, blaming yourself for things you didn't control. That's your soul being drained. Slowly, quietly. And here's the hardest part to accept. Sometimes, the person we need to forgive the most is ourselves. Forgiveness isn't about pretending something never happened. It isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing not to keep reliving it. It's about looking at who you were, with all your flaws and mistakes, and saying, I was doing the best I could with what I knew at the time. Because isn't that the truth? Hindsight is always clear. But back then, you didn't have the clarity you do now. You were navigating life with the understanding you had in that moment. And that's all any of us can do. So let me ask you, when was the last time you forgave yourself? For the things you didn't know? For the choices you made when you were just trying to survive? For the mistakes that taught you lessons? Because if you don't, you'll keep carrying them. And the longer you carry them, the heavier they become. And here's the thing about guilt. It doesn't just sit in the background. It shapes your life. It makes you over-apologize. It makes you overcompensate. It makes you feel like you have to earn love, like you don't deserve joy, like you have to keep proving yourself. That's not living. That's a quiet kind of suffering. So, how do you reclaim yourself from guilt? It starts with a decision, a simple but powerful one. You decide to stop punishing yourself. You decide to let the past be what it is, a lesson, not a life sentence. You decide to replace guilt with something far more useful, responsibility. Because guilt just keeps you stuck. It focuses on the past. But responsibility? That focuses on what you can do now. If there's something you can fix, fix it. If there's someone you can apologize to, apologize. If there's a lesson to be learned, learn it. But beyond that, let it go. Because your soul wasn't meant to carry a lifetime of regret. Now, I know, letting go isn't always easy. And there's one thing that makes it even harder: the expectations of others. The pressure to be who they want you to be, to live the way they think you should, to fit into the roles they've assigned you. And that's the third thing that drains your soul. Have you ever stopped to think about how much of your life was shaped by other people's expectations? Not your dreams, not your desires, not what truly made sense for you, but what others thought you should do, who you should be, how you should live. It starts early. Maybe it was your parents. Maybe it was society. Maybe it was the quiet pressure of wanting to be liked, to be accepted, to belong. So, you did what was expected. You followed the rules. You tried to be the person others wanted you to be. But somewhere along the way, you lost yourself. And the worst part? You didn't even realize it was happening. Because expectations are sneaky. They don't always come as direct orders. Sometimes they come as silent disapproval, a raised eyebrow, a disappointed sigh. The subtle reminder that who you are isn't quite enough. So you start adjusting, shrinking, changing, trying to fit into the mold that makes others comfortable. And after years, sometimes decades of doing this, you wake up one day and wonder, who am I really? That's how it happens. That's how the soul gets drained. Not through big dramatic betrayals, but through a lifetime of small compromises. And here's the hardest truth. No matter how much you try to please everyone, it will never be enough. Because expectations are a moving target. The moment you meet one, another takes its place. You get the job, and they ask when you'll get the promotion. You get married, and they ask when you'll have kids. You work hard, and they ask why you don't relax more. You relax, and they ask why you're not working harder. It never ends. And if you keep chasing approval, you'll spend your whole life running in circles, exhausted and unfulfilled. So, how do you reclaim yourself from this? First, you have to understand the cost of living for others. Because every time you choose their expectations over your truth, you give up a piece of yourself. You give up your dreams to follow their plans. You give up your peace to meet their standards. You give up your voice to keep them comfortable. And after enough time, you start to believe that your own desires don't matter, that your needs are selfish, that who you are isn't enough. But here's something you need to hear. You do not exist to meet other people's expectations. You were not born to fit into their mold. You are not here to make everyone else comfortable at the expense of your own joy. And if someone only loves you when you meet their expectations, that's not love. That's control. Think about that for a moment. How many relationships in your life are built on who you are, and how many are built on who they want you to be? Because real love, real connection, doesn't come with conditions. It doesn't demand that you change or shrink yourself. It accepts you as you are. Now, I know letting go of expectations isn't easy, especially when you've spent a lifetime trying to be what others need. But you have to ask yourself, what's the price of continuing? Because the longer you live for others, the further you drift from yourself. And there's nothing lonelier than living a life that doesn't feel like your own. So, what can you do? First, start listening to yourself. Not your fears, not your guilt, not the voices of everyone else telling you what you should do. Listen to the part of you that knows, the quiet, steady voice inside that whispers what truly feels right. What do you want? What kind of life would you choose if no one else's opinions mattered? For many people, this question is terrifying because they've spent so long ignoring their own desires that they don't even know the answer. But it's never too late to find out. Second, learn to disappoint people. Yes, you heard that right. Because when you start living for yourself, not everyone will like it. Some people will be upset. Some will resist. Some will make you feel guilty for changing. And that's okay. Because their disappointment is not your burden to carry. It simply means that you are finally putting yourself first. And if someone truly loves you, they will respect that, even if it takes time. And third, let go of the need for permission. Too many people wait for someone else to tell them it's okay to be themselves. But the truth is, no one is going to give you that permission. You have to give it to yourself. So, let me ask you, what expectations have been weighing you down? And what would happen if you finally let them go? Because the moment you do, you'll feel something you may not have felt in a long time. Freedom. Now, there's something else that keeps people stuck in soul-draining cycles, something even deeper than expectations. And that's holding on to things that were meant to be released. It's a strange thing, how we hold on to things long after they've stopped serving us. Old resentments, old versions of ourselves, people who have long since left, but whose presence still lingers in our hearts. We cling to these things, not because they bring us joy, but because they're familiar. And that, my friend, is the fourth thing that drains your soul, holding on to what was meant to be released. If you look closely, you'll see that much of your exhaustion doesn't come from what's happening now, but from the weight of everything you refuse to let go of. The friendships that have run their course, the mistakes you keep punishing yourself for, the anger that has overstayed its welcome, the version of yourself that no longer fits who you are. It's heavy, isn't it? And yet, we convince ourselves that we have to carry it. Why? Because letting go feels like loss, and loss feels like failure. We think, if I let go of this relationship, does it mean I wasted all those years? If I forgive, does it mean what they did was okay? If I change, will people still recognize me? But here's the truth. Letting go is not losing. It's making room. Making room for better relationships. Making room for peace. Making room for a version of yourself that isn't weighed down by old wounds. And I know, it's not easy. Because pain, even when it hurts, is still familiar. And sometimes, we choose familiarity over freedom. But you have to ask yourself, how much longer am I willing to carry this? Because the longer you hold on to something that no longer serves you, the more it drains you. And if you want to reclaim your soul, you have to be willing to release what no longer belongs. Not just the people who've hurt you, not just the mistakes of your past, but the fear that keeps you from moving forward. And that leads us to the fifth and final thing that drains your soul, the fear of change. Because if we're honest, that's what keeps most people stuck. Not a lack of opportunity, not a lack of options, but fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of starting over, fear of stepping outside the life they've always known. And so they stay. They stay in jobs that drain them. They stay in relationships that no longer bring them joy. They stay in old patterns, repeating the same cycles, simply because it's easier than stepping into something new. But here's something that took me years to learn. Nothing is more exhausting than resisting change. Because change is life. It's growth. It's movement. And when you refuse to change, when you fight to keep everything the same, you're not just standing still. You're slowly withering. Because deep down, your soul wants to evolve. It wants to expand. It wants to break free from the patterns and fears that have kept you stuck. But fear will tell you, what if it doesn't work out? What if you regret it? What if it's too late? And I'll tell you this, regret doesn't come from change. It comes from staying in a life that no longer fits you. Because when you look back, it won't be the risks you took that haunt you. It will be the moments you let pass, the chances you didn't take, the years you spent waiting for the right time. So, let me ask you, what are you afraid of changing? And what would happen if you finally let go of that fear? Because when you do, something incredible happens. You start feeling light again. You start waking up with energy instead of dread. You start recognizing yourself, not as the person you were, but as the person you were always meant to become. That's what it means to reclaim your soul. Not just in big, dramatic ways, but in the quiet, daily choices to release what drains you and embrace what gives you life. To stop carrying burdens that aren't yours. To let go of guilt that no longer serves you. To stop living for other people's expectations. To release the past. To move forward, even when it's scary. Because at the end of your life, you won't care about the opinions that held you back. You'll care about whether you truly lived. So, let today be the day you stop waiting. Let today be the day you take your soul back. And if this message spoke to you, if you felt something shift, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment, share your thoughts, and if you want more wisdom like this, a like and subscribe would mean a lot, not just for me, but for others who are searching for these same answers.